This involved a recycle process where, of course, green and recycling and all, you know, the way to do things anymore. And they are taking, as they put in a new structure, new building, they take the old parking lot or old material and they recycle it, and they'll put it on a pile, and then a rock crushing machine will come in and they'll feed the rock crusher, and it'll take that material and then it'll crush it up, and then they'll sort out the rock and then they'll reuse it. Recycling. So if you will for a moment pretend that this is a rock crushing machine, and it's a heavy duty machine. It's got its own power supply, and they take and a backhoe, or track hoe in this case, and they take and feed material into it, and then the material, it crushes it all up. The material comes out on a conveyor belt, upside down. A conveyor belt, and then you can see the conveyor belt there, and it drops into that blue thing, which is a sorter, and it sorts the rock into various sizes. So they're working on this process. The crew, the operator's got, this is his second week on the job, operating the track hoe. The rock crusher's actually sitting on a pile of rock higher than the track hoe. You have to look up to see it. And he swings around and he dumps the material in here. Well, as the material's processed, this conveyor gets plugged up, particularly when they're recycling, because of all the old concrete and what have you. This conveyor can get plugged up with junk, and it can stop or slow the conveyor. So there's a control on this recycle, or this rock crusher, that you can take with hydraulics and lift this, and then the material will dump out and it'll clean itself. That makes sense? Cleans it out, and then you can continue on. Well, they hadn't been paying much attention, and the machine started stopping the conveyor belt. It had run too long without being cleaned, and it was plugging up. So the operator of the rock crusher went over with the hydraulic control, and he tried to lift it, and it wouldn't lift because there was too much junk in there. It wouldn't lift to do the dumping. So they decided to bring the hoe over, and they would have, this stage just isn't really convenient. Watch me walk into something. Okay. Their plan was to bring the hoe in, and they'll take a wire rope and hook it on the hook on the bucket. I took the bucket off, but it had the bucket on it. And then they would have this guy go out and hook the chain onto the conveyor, and then the excavator could, as he worked this control, the excavator could help lift that to dump it. Seems like makes sense. So they get the chain on, they swings into position. The worker gets up on the conveyor. Now, if you look, I'm sitting in the cab of the excavator taking this picture, and I actually had to lean forward in the seat in order to see the conveyor because of its location. And the operator had taken and leaned forward to see what was going on. And as he leaned forward, the cuff of his rain jacket caught the joystick. Almost missed him. Now, if you look, that yellow tarp actually is covering Gerald's body when I get to the scene of the accident. So I obviously go to the owner-operator manual for the equipment involved, and I look at it, and the first thing is there, danger, do not wear loose-fitting clothing while operating this equipment. And then second, and you know, I've taught this class all over Oregon and Washington, and after classes, I frequently have an operator come up to me and tell me of some horror story he had and just fortunately survived it, involving the controls on an excavator, where he accidentally hit him or whatever. I had one guy tell me he was getting out and he caught the control and it spun around in circles, and he was just fortunate enough to survive it. I hear it all the time. And then it says, danger, deactivate operator controls when workers must enter the swing radius area. I'm like, huh? Okay, what's that? Well, in this particular excavator, this whole panel lifts up, and when you lift the panel, it deactivates the controls. Some of them have a lever that you pull to deactivate the controls. And I've had people come in the class that drive those little bitty, those cute little, not this little bitty, but those smaller excavators. And they tell me they don't have any way to deactivate the controls. Actually, they do. We went to the manual of a couple of different ones. And if you put the controls in neutral, they have a pin you can insert that keeps the controls from moving. So it's not as handy as a control lever, but it works. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Use those safety devices as they are intended. Don't just rely on eye contact. I can't tell you how many times I have investigated an accident involving a pinch point of an excavator where I thought he was just going to do this, or I thought he was going to do that, and they didn't, and something went wrong, and he did what he didn't think he was going to do, and the operator did what the other guy didn't think he would do, and they come together. I just finished a case over in Vernonia where they're tearing down the old high school, and a kid was crushed between a bucket and a thumb. I remember when I was working in Oregon OSHA in the 80s, I had a case where they were delivering a culvert, a big, huge culvert on the back of this flatbed truck, and the operator of the crane swung his boom over the top of the culvert and sent his ground guy up, a kid, 18-year-old kid, up to hook the chain up to lift the culvert off. And just as he was underneath the bucket hooking that chain up, the truck driver stuck a bill of lading in the cab of the truck and hit the joystick, and it came right down on that kid and broke his back. It's so important. I just had another one with a backhoe that out on Highway 205, where they were repaving Highway 205, and this was a few years ago. They had a backhoe with the outriggers down, and this guy was just starting with the company. He was a senior local 701 operating engineer, knew what he was doing. He was operating a track hoe back behind, and there was an apprentice on this thing, and all they were doing was picking up their debris after they had finished moving some Jersey barriers on the freeway, those big concrete barriers. And one of the things they had to pick up was a pin puller, and it's a steel device, and they have those barriers have pins in them, and they have to hook that on and take the bucket and lift the pin out of the ground. And the pin puller is about this long, and it weighs probably 25, 30 pounds. Well, he picked up that pin puller, was standing right here, picked up the pin puller and threw it in the excavator or in the backhoe, and this backhoe had case controls, which means it had foot pedals that controlled the swing. That swung and crushed him. That's the actual machine involved. And you know, the owner of the company says, I hire qualified people. I hire them out of the hall. They know what they're doing. He didn't know anything about that piece of equipment. Most of them don't have those case controls. This one did. And now there's a recall on those case controls. If you have any of that equipment with those foot pedals, they have guards that go over the foot pedals so that you can't accidentally hit them.